When you do the courses, obviously I imagine it depends on the level of experience of each writer, but is there a sense of nervousness sometimes if someone's writing in such a public course in that way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one of the what I have three questions that I ask people who come to my writers' workshops. The first one is, what do you want to write? Number two, why do you want to write it? And number three, whom do you want to have read it? And I think they're all interrelated, but they're all super important. Most people have an idea of what they want to write, but the real one you have to answer is why. Why do you want to write it? Like, why are you the person who needs to tell this story? Because if you're not very clear on the why, you'll get bored halfway through. Because writing a full book is a long process. And if you're bored, well, guess what? The reader is going to be super bored, right? So you've got to understand and what is your compelling why. And then the other side, and especially if this is in the realm of memoir or personal essay or writing your own story, whom do you want to have read it is crucial to know. If it's you want to be able to talk about your life and your story to pass on to children and grandchildren so that there's a family history there that's not lost, or traditions or cultures, especially, in America, for instance, where you might have, second generation person wanting to tell for the country they came from, that kind of story. If that's just for an immediate family, small group of people, that's one thing. You can put whatever you want in there where you feel it's sacred and it's not going to get exploited. If you think it's something for a wider audience, then you really have to think about who's going to read this and what is, back to your why are you writing it? If it's a situation, let's say in a memoir where, okay, you've had an upheaval in your life and this is how you overcame it. If that's relatable to a reader and it helps them maybe in their world overcome whatever they're going through, that makes sense. But sometimes you used to see where in memoirs they wanted something salacious, they wanted something that was just explosive and that people would take and run with it. If you're not prepared to answer questions on that down the road in interviews, don't put it in the book.
Mhm.
So that's why I think those three questions are crucial for anyone. And once I go through that in my very first writers workshop with people, people settle into where they're at and what they want to know. Like for instance, I had one example of somebody writing a story. It was basically a family history. And on the first page, she mentioned, I don't know, I want to say about 20 different characters. They were real people. And it was like that will work for her in that. Now, if that was a novel or a memoir, even, you don't want more than one, maybe two characters in the first three pages, maybe three max, because the reader needs to settle in and they need to know, okay, is this, if you list a whole bunch of characters, well, which one is going to be the main one and which is the one I need to pay attention to, what color hair they have if you're describing them. Although nowadays you don't need to describe everybody physically, like you used to back in the day.
Yeah.
So those kind of things, you've got to be clear on what you're doing. And again, so that's the what, the why, and whom do you want to have read it?
Mhm. Similar to the anthology, has there been anyone when you've taught on, say, the cruise ships, where you've read this, look at their story, and thought, wow, this person's fantastic, and then you've tried to encourage them to send some work off to publishers? Has that ever happened to you?
I'll tell you what, I had one experience last year where we were on the long haul, I think it was another transatlantic, and there was a lady came to all of our talks, and then she said to me, I really want my husband to come to the writing one. And I said, sure, it'd be great. Anyway, I ran the writing one and he came up to me afterwards and he was literally in tears. And he said, you've given me a new lease on life. And it turned out that he was a veteran. He had been through some horrific experiences and he'd been suffering PTSD and depression. And his wife had said, he's on the cruise with me, but he's kind of not. And but that was I put that talk I think around middle of the transatlantic, and at the end, a couple of days later, I bumped into her on one of the decks, and she said, "You're not going to believe it. He hasn't left the room since, but that's a good thing because he hasn't stopped writing." And I mean, for me, that was quite extraordinary that it just shows you the impact you can have on one person. And that was really phenomenal. Now, whether he's gone on to publish that or not, I don't know. I think, that might have been just a cathartic type of writing, or maybe he did. I don't know. There's been a number of people have come to me and have said, "Would you help me with my writing?" After we're off the ship, and so I bring out a newsletter every month. And part of that newsletter is a separate section for writers, which is writing tips. And I bring out that every month. And then also I do have, the option to take on a couple of writers where I'll help them and critique them with their work if they want to see to get to the next level. And a couple of people in this last cruise that we did in Japan were asking about, the perfect query letter to try and find an agent, how to approach a publisher. And I was like saying to explain to how, the things you need in a query letter. But there is no perfect query letter. It all depends on who you're addressing, and you've got to tailor make these things. You can't put out a blanket kind of an inquiry. You need to really do your research, find out what the publisher publishes, find out what they have done well with. Again, it's same with the agent. There's no point in approaching an agent, for instance, saying, "Oh, I really think, your book on blue bottles, let's say, it would work really well because mine is about green bottles." Well, if the book on blue bottles tanked and didn't do anything, well, you don't want to compare your book to that one, right? So you do your homework before you approach anybody.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. What next for you now? Because obviously, I imagine you still got to promote this book. It's not long come out. Next for you in terms of your writing? Is it just teaching, or do you have any ideas for your next book at all?
I do. I have ideas for a fiction series for a trilogy, and I'm kind of mulling over the different characters at the moment and what the plot would be. So that's kind of my next venture. The other thing what I want to be working on is adapting Flares Up about the two guys who rode across the Atlantic. I want to adapt that into a screenplay and see. It's the one question we get asked all the time. When is the movie coming out? When is the movie coming out? And whether becomes a movie or whether it's like a limited series, like a Netflix kind of 4 episode limited series, I'm not sure. But that's one of my jobs in the next, 12 months or so. I want to start adapting that into a screenplay.
Have you spoken to those two men since obviously all the promotion work behind Flares Up, those two sailors?
Oh yeah, we're in contact all the time. In fact, we were talking the other day. Yeah, absolutely. It's 5 years on since they actually came ashore, believe it or not. Yeah, we're in contact all of the time. And they do promotions on the book as well in the UK. And then we have no spoiler alert, but they have recorded some to address the people on the cruise ship. So they talk a little bit about from their point of view.